Howdy neighbors, I'm Phil Hudock, and I welcome you to Man's Law, God's Law, a collision of course. And this is the premiere program. I hope to be on every Thursday night on Channel 3 at 8:30. I have some interesting, I believe, information to share with you, important for your future and your children's future. And that's one of the reasons I have this program, but I'd like to share a little bit about who I am, where I came from, what makes me tick, and why I do what I do. In 1976, 40 years ago, the 200th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, I came to Randolph County on Valentine's Day, February 14th on a Saturday. And I came from the northern panhandle of West Virginia to take an open teaching position at Tygarts Valley High School to teach chemistry and physics. And I've taught in Randolph County for the past 40 years. Presently, I'm semi-retired. I substitute. But I've really worn a number of hats in this county. And, just to give you an idea, I taught at Elkins High School besides Tygarts Valley and Pickens School. As the Charleston Gazette says, I've been a frequent candidate for office over the past 40 years. I was chairman of the Constitution Party, and presently I'm running for governor for the state of West Virginia, constitutional governor, I should say, for the state of West Virginia. That would be the lawful governor, okay? Not the legal governor. I was a member of the Randolph County Tax Study Group and a member of the Randolph County Planning Commission. I've had some interesting situations. I was fired from my teaching job in 2000 for not enforcing barcoded IDs. I felt that we were going into a police state, and that it was conditioning for the biblical mark of the beast. And at that time, there were no implantable chips. There wasn't the Real ID Act. There wasn't biometric facial identification. But all those things have happened since then, and I had to take a case to the West Virginia Supreme Court, which I won. Also, when things got really bad at the DMV, and I realized that they were mapping my face. They gave you the option of your fingerprint, but they actually map your face, put it in Interpol, an international criminal database, which goes to China and Russia and places like that. I felt that was an infringement on my God-given uniqueness, that I was surrendering something that God gave to me that the state was going to use to identify me, kind of like taking my DNA. And maybe I shouldn't give them any ideas. But after 8 years of driving without a driver's license, Governor Manchin, we negotiated with him. We had help from a state senator, Senator Barnes. Governor Manchin granted us an accommodation, and so I was able to get a non-biometric driver's license. And and there was another Supreme Court case concerning the 1989 Parental Leave Act, which again I had to take to the state Supreme Court, and because of that, now the state is honoring the rule of law that the legislature duly passed. And I do believe in the rule of law. If we don't have the rule of law, we're going to have chaos. The state does rightfully recognize people's rights to defend themselves. And that's good. That's great. West Virginia is one of 5 states now where you don't have to pay for what should be a blessing given to you by God, which is the mandate to protect yourself and protect the innocent and protect the ones who can't protect themselves. And But if we don't have the rule of law, I don't care how many guns you have, we're going to have chaos. Okay, so that's very important to me. So those are some of the things that make me tick. I wear a number of different hats. Actually, this is one of my favorite hats. A lot of people know me with this hat. Okay, this is my golf hat. Okay, and I used to be golf coach of Elkhorn High School. I was chess coach of Tigers Valley. They were state champs. Not that I was that great a chess player, but I provided them with the opportunity, and they ran with it. So another hat I have is my grass cutting hat here, my 2010 census hat. It says 10 questions, 10 minutes. Well, the problem is you should only have one question. How many people live in your house? And if you get the 10 questions, that's actually the abbreviated. They'd like to ask you about 30 or 40 questions, and it's none of their business. So I just wear this hat, which I didn't work for the census, but I was given that hat. So I wear a number of different hats. Yeah, I do. Now, sometimes people say I'm crazy, extremist, and I guess to some extent I am. As a matter of fact, a lot of what people say about me that don't like me is probably true. One thing in particular that I found is what was published in a national publication that goes to law enforcement agencies. It's called the Intelligence Report by the Southern Poverty Law Center. They aren't restricted to the southern areas. They have millions of dollars, are probably the greatest hate group in the country. But they decided to pick on some folks in 2014. This is summer 2014 issue 154, which I got from a friend of mine who will remain anonymous. But in an article entitled Electoral Extremism, a dirty dozen of political candidates with extremist ideas are running for office this year. So they picked 12 candidates in the entire United States to highlight, to finger as extremist. And yours truly, Phil Hudock, who is running for U.S. Senate, West Virginia Constitution Party, is right here. And I'd like to read what they say because about 90% of it is true. And it says, Phil Hudock is chairman of the West Virginia chapter of the theocratic and anti-LGBT Constitution Party and a former public school teacher with a history of Christian-based activism. In 2008, he and a handful of others successfully petitioned the Department of Motor Vehicles to remove their photos from driver's licenses, saying they violated their religious beliefs because digitized photos contain, quote, the mark of the beast. I didn't say that, okay? However, we are entering a police state if you haven't, newsflash if you haven't realized that. Goes on to say, in 2012, Hudock's daughter was banned from her high school because the family refused to comply with the new vaccination requirements. Well, first of all, it wasn't the family refused. My daughter refused. It was her decision. She was a senior at Pickens School. And it's interesting that we had new vaccine requirements. You had to take a booster because before they didn't expect you to have to take a booster because it was supposed to last, but it didn't last. But then I guess maybe they weren't exactly right on what the vaccine would or wouldn't or could or couldn't do. Hudock went to court and the school was ordered to provide home educational services for his daughter, who was also allowed to participate in its commencement ceremony. Well, she was valedictorian, so yeah, she should have participated in the commencement ceremony. Hudak manages the website of Call to Decision Ministries. That's true. Which traffics in 9/11 conspiracy theories. Well, I do teach physics and understand steel reinforced buildings and free fall and Newton's laws. I would have to actually apologize to my students if what happened in New York City on 9/11 is what we were told. We would be refuting the laws of physics, and I would have to apologize. It goes on to say he traffics in anti-vaccination myths, like the idea that vaccines are used to sterilize the population. I think it was Africa and smallpox vaccine, and that was found to happen. It also we also have, I guess, derogatory claims about immigrant anchor babies and homos. Well, I've never said anchor babies, and I've never said homos. So that's not true. And the anti-government patriot conspiracy theory about a secret plan or plot to form a socialistic global government known as the New World Order. Oh, by the way, I think by the end of this program tonight, I will share a quote from David Rockefeller saying exactly that. Okay? So stay tuned. On his site, Hudak asserts that he serves God, family, country in that order. Yeah, I do. That's what Scripture says. That's what a Christian worldview is. And says that the New World Order is an anathema to everything I believe in. Amen. Thank you. Southern Poverty Law Center, hey, I think you did an excellent job. A few things I would disagree with, but yes, I was a candidate, and I did travel the state, okay, everywhere. Northern Panhandle, Eastern Panhandle, down to Bluefield, over to Huntington, and all parts in between, and even DC, where I took a 7-foot tall, smoke-blowing, talking Obama head, okay? This man, I don't believe I think most of you would agree with me that this man is not pro-America. I don't think he may not even, he's not my president. Now, does the country really have a problem? If this article in the New York Times doesn't sum up where this country is headed, nothing will. Nothing. It's titled, U.S. directs public schools to allow transgender access to restrooms. Is this insanity or what? Will the Southern Poverty Law Center take up this issue and call the people promoting this as extremist? Well, they certainly should. So let's go to the first program, the first presentation that was given to the Randolph County Commission. This is March 3rd, 2016. I'm not even going to, let's just go into it, and you will see that we are living in Alice in Wonderland in terms of what form of government we were supposed to have and what form of government we have. So this will be the March 6th, followed by the April 21st, followed by the May 5th presentation to the County Commission. So I will be back after this presentation to kind of see where we are and talk about the second presentation. So God bless. Hang in there. Fasten your seatbelt. titled this "The Rule of Law, Do We Have It?" We commonly call those $100 up there. 1950 issue, that was the year I was born, the top one. The bottom one's 2009. But is it really $100? There's a little note up in the corner, the left-hand corner on the top and the right-hand corner on the bottom. And we're going to look at those close up here. The top one says, "This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and is redeemable in lawful money at the United States Treasury or any Federal Reserve Bank." So it's telling you it's legal but not lawful. Redeemable and lawful, okay? The other one says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. And as a matter of fact, the top one says, in the middle, "will pay to the bearer on demand $100. Well, if you're going to be paying $100 for that, well then that really isn't $100. Okay? We're talking legal, lawful, constitutional here. Our Constitution says, Congress shall have power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin. And it says, no state shall, and it goes on to say, make anything but gold and silver coin a legal tender in payment of debts. This is $100, worth $1,600. Up there, what I showed you is not worth $1,600 because this kept its value, whereas everything else, and I just want you to see, this is like 6 pounds of silver. Very heavy. So take a look at it, okay? And all those bills that I'm showing you are on the table there, and the sheriff's here. Okay. Just warn you. Randolph. You know, something's happened. You know, the Constitution is not the supreme law of the land anymore. We say it is. Now, this man back here who came all the way up from Beckley today for this is his check. And he wrote a letter to the tax commissioner and said he wanted to be paid in lawful money. That's an honest request. He wanted to be paid in lawful money, what the Constitution says is money. But it was denied by the tax commissioner. The tax commissioner said he could not give him lawful money. As a matter of fact, when I went to buy a car one time, I went to Belington Bank and they asked for collateral, and I said, "Can I give you gold?" And they said, "No, there's 2 things we cannot take. It's collateral, gold or silver." Now think about it. Lawful money, a bank can't take. It's illegal to have lawful money in a bank to take it. Some of you may remember silver certificates. This is 1935. This is 1934. Interesting how it changed. Okay, it was Roosevelt that added the rather occultic symbols, or at least the occultic symbol on the left there. And the $5 bill on the top, this is very interesting. 1963, it only came out in 63. It was issued by Kennedy. Notice on the top it says United States note. This says Federal Reserve note. Of course, when we say a bill, what's a bill? That's something you owe. Notes, these are debt instruments. We do not have money, we have debt instruments. Okay, is it important? Well, our founders thought it was important, and shortly after Kennedy died, his body was probably still warm. Lyndon Baines Johnson rescinded the executive order that Kennedy had to bypass the Federal Reserve, which is a private for-profit bank. This is Gene Steinecker, and I'm Phil Hudak. We're in Charleston. It's February 24th, and we are going to serve some legislators with a petition of redress of grievances. And then in 1933, remember when they confiscated the gold? Roosevelt actually had Congress pass an act giving him dictatorial powers as long as we were in a state of emergency, and suspended the Constitution. See, here's where West Virginia comes in. Our Constitution states that it is valid during wartime and peace. In wartime and in peace. Well, the federal government said, no, you've lost your rights because we're in a period of war. But we will grant you rights by a license, which is permission to do that, which is otherwise illegal. And basically we want to just bring this to the public that, something's wrong with this picture. Something has to be done because my children, my grandchildren, I don't know if you have children?
I don't have any children, but I have relatives, young
Yeah.
relatives. Yes.
Well, you know, they really don't have a future if we don't have the rule of law.
Roosevelt did this. Roosevelt did this.
Roosevelt did it, yeah.
This is 1933, what was posted in post offices. You had to turn in your gold on or before May 1st, or you got $10,000 fine or 10 years imprisonment. Now, I can tell you in 1933, $10,000 was a lot of money. Okay? How did this happen? Because we were in a state of emergency. It was called the War Powers Act of 1933, when our Constitution, federal and state, was suspended. And here's what's interesting. Here's what Roosevelt said. Here's his proclamation. Now, therefore, I, Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States, in view of such continuing national emergency, in virtue of the authority vested in me by a congressional law that was written by the Federal Reserve, they actually wrote the law for it, and notice the last line, continued in full force and effect until further proclamation by the President. It's never been rescinded, folks. We're still in a state of emergency. War on poverty, war on crime, war on terrorism, war on drugs. They can do anything they want. Obama can do anything he wants. He is not bound by the Constitution. Hasn't been since 1933. And this is 1973, what a senator, Congressman Beck said. The vast powers taken, this is 73, this is 40 years afterwards. He said the vast powers taken together confer enough authority to rule the country without reference to normal constitutional processes. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the President may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, communication, regulate operation of private enterprise. How about GNC? Restrict travel and in authoritative ways control the lives of all Americans, and this situation has continued uninterrupted since March 9, 1933. So the majority of people in the United States have lived their lives, entire lives, under a state of emergency. Here's what our Constitution says at the bottom. It says, the provisions of the Constitution of the United States and of this state are operative alike in a period of war as in time of peace, and any departure therefrom or violation thereof under the plea of necessity or any other plea is subversive of good government and tends to anarchy and despotism. We're moving into anarchy and despotism, I'm afraid to say. This is in this room. You talked about the rule of law and federal intrusion, and this involves both. And that is, and I'm going to read from the West Virginia Constitution.
Sure.
No charter of incorporation shall be granted any church. Now, the reason for that is so a corporation is a creation of the state, and a corporation is controlled by the state to some extent. And how can we have a moral society? You know, we have the drug problems and a lot of things that have to do with morals and a moral meltdown that we're seeing in our country. And yet the churches in West Virginia, by the Constitution, are actually supposed to be free of the federal government, the IRS, you know, this overreaching federal intrusion that we see, you know. And my question is do we have a constitutional crisis?
Well, I take every one of your comments very seriously, and I was able to look a little bit at the issue you had provided to our office prior. I would say this, the state constitution always you need to breathe meaning into it. And there is a specific provision in place, Article 6, Section 47, and that's very relevant. So we're just beginning to look at some of that case law, that issue that you brought to our attention. I can tell you that I take very seriously the First Amendment to the Constitution. And as many of you may know, we have weighed in on issues pertaining to religious freedom. Okay, for 2 years, we've been waiting for an answer from Mr. Morrissey, who offered us an answer. He did to Gene Stonecker while we were down there. Pastor Mike House went with us from Randolph County. Right there is the law. It says there, no charter of incorporation shall be granted to churches. And I can tell you this, churches are scared to death of the IRS because the government now, you know, you've got to do what is politically correct, okay? So basically, I took this to the churches, the DVD set that I've given you commissioners. It's a tremendous video.
Charlie Daniels narrates part of it, and I'm telling you, we're in trouble, folks, because the churches are afraid of the government. You can't have muzzled churches in a moral society. It isn't going to happen. So the Constitution Party met. I proposed a resolution that we get back to the rule of law. In Pittsburgh, the National Constitution Party, they passed a resolution. Here's what they said. Be it resolved by the Constitution Party National Committee that we publicly demand the people's representatives in all three branches of West Virginia government acknowledge that a constitutional crisis exists and to immediately begin to rectify what is currently a clear and present danger to the liberty and well-being of its people. And then it goes further on, all states should get involved in this battle for the rule of law, for our Constitution.
And everyone has to follow the law. No one is above the law. But we know that the administration's track record on the rule of law is very poor.
So I want to leave you with this. Article 1, Section 2 of the West Virginia Constitution. Internal government and police. Listen to this. The government of the United States is a government of enumerated powers, and all powers not delegated to it nor inhibited to the states are reserved to the states or to the people thereof. Among the powers so reserved to the states is the exclusive regulation of our own internal government and police, and it is the high and solemn duty of the several departments of government created by this Constitution to guard and protect the people of this state from all encroachments upon the rights so reserved. We see the government running over the states with illegal immigration and everything else, and I bring it to you folks because you took an oath to the Constitution. You are our representatives. I want you to contact Mr. Morrissey. I want you to contact the governor and the legislature and say, we have a constitutional crisis. And you've been addressed, you know this, what are you going to do about it? You know, I took an oath to the state and federal constitution in 1974 with my first teaching license. I didn't bring it here, but you know, I take it seriously. And I'm handing the ball to you. But it's all our jobs, everybody here. Not just, government is us, not just them. They're just our representatives, and I want to thank you. Let's get into the second presentation that was given to the Randolph County Commission, and this is April 21st. And in this presentation, Mike House, and a man by the name of Gene Stonecker, who you heard about in the first presentation, were at the County Commission to again bring up the rule of law, the Constitution, and focus on what is ailing the country, which is a moral meltdown. The founders said our form of government was only designed for a self-governing people who were governed because there was an omniscient, omnipresent God who you couldn't fool, and that there was a price to pay, a payday coming, and that you were responsible for what you did or didn't do, the sins of omission or the sins of commission. So you're going to see you're going to see some videos, and I really do want to stress that the churches cannot be muzzled. You can't have a moral society with muzzled churches. It was the churches and the Black Brigade that formed this country. Lexington Green was church property, and those were people with their pastor who kept their armaments in the church. So we haven't been told our true heritage, our true Christian heritage. Unfortunately, that's true. So let's watch the second presentation to the Randolph County Commission, April 21st, 2016.
Under public comment, we have had 3 individuals sign up to speak: Mr. Phil Hudak, Pastor Mike House, and Mr. Gene Stonecker. So Phil, if you want to start, please limit your remarks to 5 minutes.
Okay, each of us 5, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, we are live streaming this,
Okay.
and I'm here to really address Joyce's prayer, which is that we ask God for help, because I was hoping the sheriff would be here, because we do have a problem. It's not unique to Randolph County, but drugs and crime is a problem we have, and I'm sure the county commission can attest to that. But Pastor Mike is going to go first, and we're going to have a video here which you'll have comments about it. Then I'll go second, and then Gene Soniker is from Beckley, and he's going to go third.
Pastors of the church in this nation in the 1700s literally were the fire behind the revolution.
America, God is still sending his prophets.
They taught their people that there was only one king, and his name was not George, or not the civil state at all, but Jesus.
There are prophets that telling you about all these things. You have to listen.
The church's trustees and pastors can be and have been arrested already in America for standing on the principles of what the scriptures tell us.
I met Christians in Magadan. Some of them were in prison for 25 years. They worked in the gulags because they were preaching the gospel.
Further, it states, no substantial part of the activities of the corporation. Notice that they're not saying church, they're saying corporation. You have become incorporated. No substantial part of the activities of corporation shall be carrying on a propaganda. IRS page, publication 557, page 17. Propaganda is normally defined as spreading of doctrine. The doctrine of Christ is one example of doctrine.
Where we once were, we are no longer a Christian nation.
Something that we're told over and over again is that politics has no place in the pulpit. Now, I want you to think about this. When the founders talked about politics, they didn't mean Democrat and Republican like we do today. They didn't even have political parties. When they used the word politics, they meant the biblical principles that undergird a right and just government. Now, out of all the institutions that God created, 3 of them, the family, human government, and church, are critical. Now, why would it be that God would create government and then tell his people to stay out of it?
The 501c3 religious organizations are structured to serve 2 masters. Now, folks, Christ tells us you cannot serve 2 masters. You cannot serve God and mammon, mammon being man and money and wealth and materialism. The church has lost its power in this stand. The church once was the pure, solid foundation for this nation.
So where did this idea of separation of church and state come from? Because you certainly won't find it in the Bible, and you certainly won't find it in the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. In his farewell address, George Washington said that our republic could not exist if we did not have morality and religion.
Pray. Pray God's mercy will prevail.
In America, we have so many preachers, but they're concerned more about people being happy.
So this concept of the separation of church and state is actually a lie.
This nation was and is a Christian nation, Mr. Obama, and we're getting off the couch. We're going to turn the TV off. We're listening now.
Pastors today believe that somehow it's written into the Constitution. They'll often say, well, the First Amendment says that we have to have a separation of church and state. But I challenge you to look at the First Amendment. You won't find the words separation, church, or state.
The only hope for America is for the church to repent.
Everybody said this is impossible to reach every home. But after 22 years, we reached 64 million people.
Come out from this horror of this world system and the civil powers that now control them, and stand for righteousness once again with the integrity and the fire of righteous indignation in their bones and in their spirit and in their hearts and their mind, to the point that they will not compromise, that they will speak the truth no matter what the cost. Let the civil authority do what they may. The church must stand for truth, or America is finished.
With God, everything is possible.
Listen to the heartbeat of America.
As mentioned there on the video, the church, the family, and the state, those are the institutions God's working through today. And we're finding, as all of us know, that there's certainly many problems. And the root of that is the family. There's a real problem in the family. And I was at a Development Authority meeting just a week or so ago, and Heather Viola was there with Kids Count. And she shared some statistics that were quite disturbing about how in Randolph County we're the 50th of the counties in care of our children, the highest teen birth rate, the highest suicide rate of the state in Randolph County. Tells me there's a problem, and obviously, as Phil mentioned, drugs are at issue in that. But you know, folks, they were there to speak to the Development Authority about receiving some help. And today, there's going to be those who are requesting help from you guys, and that's certainly nothing wrong with that. And you know, wherever the County Commission, Development Authority can help is good, but money is not the answer. And that's what's the issue. You know, we can pour. You know, the Board of Education, we're pouring money into our schools, and there's millions of dollars going into our schools, but we're still getting the same results. And that's because we're not changing what's going on. What has to happen, and the only hope there is for the church and God's people to be involved. And we've got to see the church alive again. The church is not a corporation. The government is not to control the church and to keep the church from carrying on. We're to have free exercise of our religion. And so we need to have that opportunity. And when that happens, it hinders the church. One of the things I appreciate, we're getting ready to build a church building. And fortunately in our county, the building ordinances, there's not building ordinances that hinder us from doing what we need to do as a church. And I appreciate that. Hopefully it'll never be an issue where ordinances are passed that would hinder. But there still are delays because there's several things that the government does require, from the Highway Department to the DEP, which held us up for several months last year by fining us and giving a cease and desist order. The government has to give us the freedom to do what we've been called to do in preaching the Word of God and carrying on the work of God. And so I would trust that the County Commission, those of you here as a part of that, would be mindful of that you would not do things that would hinder the church from doing what needs to be done. Because as the church and the government and the people, families work together, we can see a change. That's the answer, the Word of God. And I appreciate again the
Thanks,
County
Pastor Mann.
Commission.
What we're here about really is the rule of law. And this is going to be a very focused thing because the County Commission has a duty, just as we have a duty, that we have the rule of law. And what you're going to see here is on the internet. It's very disturbing. This is Wesley Clark, a 4-star general, okay? This is 2007, and listen to what he's going to tell you happened in 1991.
And we had instead a policy coup in this country. A coup. A policy coup. Some hard-nosed people took over the direction of American policy, and they never bothered to inform the rest of us. I went downstairs, I was leaving the Pentagon, and an officer from the Joint Staff called me into his office and said, I want you to know, he said, sir, we're going to attack Iraq. And I said, why? He said, we don't know. He said, I said, well, did they tie Saddam to 9/11? He said, no. And then I came back to the Pentagon about 6 weeks later. I saw the same officer. I said, why haven't we attacked Iraq? We still going to attack Iraq? He said, oh, sir. He says, it's worse than that. He said, he pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office. It says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. I said, 7 countries in 5 years. I said, is that a classified memo? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me. He was about to show it to me. He said, because I want to talk about it. And I sat on this information for a long time, for about 6 or 8 months. I was so stunned by this, I couldn't begin to talk about it. To sort of deter conflict, we're going to invade countries, and you know, my mind was spinning. And I put that aside. It was like a nugget that you hold on to. This country was taken over by a group of people with a policy coup. Wolfowitz and Cheney and Rumsfeld, and you could name a half-dozen other collaborators from the Project for a New American Century.
Now, Mike, I believe you and I are about the same age. I was born in 1950. Here's 4 wars, another 4, that's 8, 12 wars, 16 wars, 17 wars in my lifetime, and not one of those was a constitutional declared war. Not one. Every one of them was unconstitutional. Okay? So since I've been born, and this is a presentation that I gave to WVU to a history class, it's now 53 years we've been at war, and 13 years of my life we haven't been at war. That's my lifetime, and yours too. The U.S. Constitution says, Article 1, Section 8, Congress shall have the power to declare war.
But we know that the administration's track record on the rule of law is very poor, and everyone has to follow the law. No one is above the law.
You know, he says no one's above the law, but in here 2 years ago, I approached him with the Constitution of West Virginia says no charter of incorporation shall be granted any church or religious denomination. 2 years ago. And he said, you know, the Constitution is I take it very seriously, and I'll get back with you. And this is the actual hand-penned, which I found in the archives. This was hand-penned in 1872, and it says, no charter of incorporation. It's word for word exactly what we have in our blue book. And this is 2014 when I met with Patrick Morrissey, asked him that question, okay? And I took an oath in '74 when I got my first teaching job to support the Constitution of the United States and West Virginia. And it's more than just you've taken an oath, I've taken an oath, and I don't care whether you've taken an oath or not. This is from West Virginia's Office of Budget, West Virginia State Budget Office.
Department of Revenue.
Yeah, and it says we are the top of government. We are the government. It's just we delegated, that's all, okay? That's 15 years difference between me sending to everyone in our legislature, every sheriff, every county commission president, either a VCR or a DVD, okay? In which case, I took a case to the Supreme Court, which is still pending, and the West Virginia Supreme Court is in default and dishonor. Now, John Adams says we have no government armed in power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Our Constitution was made for religious and moral people, wholly inadequate for the government of any other. Well, the sheriff knows we have a drug problem, don't we? Big time. And that's what this is, you know, focusing on, because our preamble of our Constitution says we were founded through divine providence. If we don't still have divine intervention, we're going to lose it. Now, you all have a video there, okay? Everyone got one up here. It's called An Appalachian Dawn, and you won't find this in mainstream media, but there is a town not far from here in southeastern Kentucky, in Clay County, that absolutely turned their town around, which you're going to see a video that Gene's going to tell you about. And
Bill, you're running out of time, even with the three of you, so you can...
Let him go ahead and finish.
Yeah, so you got about 5 minutes left.
Go ahead and finish.
okay, there's the crime rate. There it is. West Virginia, right there, one of the highest states in increasing incarceration rate. This is Gene's presentation.
Once a year we have a bluegrass festival, and people come from Indiana and Ohio and everywhere.
Believe me, it's a treat too, because it's good food, good picking and grinning, good music.
In early 2000, while most of the world was celebrating the dawn of a new millennium, Clay County was on the verge of losing an entire generation to drugs.
Every neighbor I had sold drugs, abused drugs.
I was drinking and smoking marijuana every day, and eventually got to where I was doing the pain pills every day.
You wake up in the morning, think about using, you go to bed thinking about using, you do anything for that drug.
It had that hold on me. I would do anything to get it.
It took something like drugs that everybody, you could walk in at that time into any church in Clay County. You say, how many of you have somebody in the immediate family that's on drugs, and 95% of the people would raise their hands.
This is my child.
And that drug, that sin, brought us together.
Then, on the verge of oblivion, a spark of anger. The community might go down, but they would go down fighting.
We covenanted together that we were going to fight together, shoulder to shoulder, side by side.
People got tired of burying the kids. I think it just finally got to a boiling point where people just absolutely said, it's enough.
You took sides that day. And either you're going to side with corrupt government or you're going to side with God.
And something broke. A line of people all bunched together, and it was almost a mile long. I thought, wow. I thought, God is really doing something here. He's really doing something.
Truth was told before us, written by his hand. The word of God for all to see, like footprints in the sand. Listen now and you will hear the misery of your plight. When dawn becomes a morning, the darkness put to flight. Oh, oh, brothers, can't you see? Oh, oh, sisters, why can't we join our hands and walk with him, the man from Galilee? Join our hands and walk with him, the man from Galilee. Backed into a corner and off misunderstood. Dreamed about a future where
Okay, y'all got the book, textbook Tea Party, 1974. This is what happened in Charleston. Gene was part of it. He was detained for speaking up, and so you each got a signed copy by the author. Okay, his name's Carl Priest. And these are some of the scenes. A lot of people don't know what happened in 1974, but they got sick and tired of corrupted textbooks, and they, I mean, the coal mines shut down to support the people. And that's the author there on the bottom, Carl Priest. He was giving this book out at the Capitol, and there's Gene, who was involved in that textbook battle. And so that basically, what I'm telling you is this: West Virginia has been at the forefront of some things. We have some terrible problems here. I know the sheriff will agree. I know, Tim, you look at the newspaper, how many, just about every day. It's sad. And the churches need to get together, and they can. I'm just asking you that maybe we start a revival by getting the churches free of the government, because I think that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of not being politically correct. So I want to thank you.
Okay.
I want to thank you very much.
Well, Bill, thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Regarding the alternate route for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, Mr. Bob Orndorff. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners, and I always appreciate the opportunity to come here and apologize. I haven't been here for a while and had to do my 3-month sentence in Charleston. And now that that's over, I'm trying to play catch up. First, I want to address the two young men here that did the presentation earlier. My first job when I got out of college, it was in Manchester, Kentucky.
Is that right?
And it wasn't a pleasant area to work in. It was a rough area. So I'm glad that things have happened there, because it really need to happen.
When our government is out of line, it's our job to bring it back. Okay, the ultimate responsibility is with us. We are the government; they just represent us. Okay, so they're a creation of us. We are not a creation of them. We do not work for them; they work for us. We have our responsibilities, and they have their responsibilities. So we're going to go into the third program, where I addressed the Randolph County Commission, and I petitioned them, much as I petitioned the state legislature, for timely action to be taken addressing the violation of Article 6, Section 47. In other words, I'm concentrating on one violation of the Constitution, Article 6, Section 47, which says in black and white, in two sentences, and the first sentence is, churches are prohibited from incorporating. One of the best things in our Constitution.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order for agenda business, and the first item on the agenda will be public comment. Mr. Hudak has signed up, so Bill, you have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, sir. I just have a 3-page document to read to you. This is a First Amendment petition for timely action to be taken by the acting Randolph County Commissioners addressing the violation in Randolph County, West Virginia, of Article 6, Section 47 of the West Virginia Constitution. Article 6, Section 47 is as follows. No charter of incorporation shall be granted to any church or religious denomination. Provisions may be made by general laws for securing the title to church property and for the sale and transfer thereof, so that it shall be held, used, or transferred for the purposes of such church or religious denomination. In these two sentences, the framers of our 1872 state constitution secured churches from undue government influence and the ever-changing whims of political correction. The importance of civil rule of law and ecclesiastical rule of Scripture cannot be overemphasized. In reality, churches are non-taxable. They are not to be Caesar's properties or corporate creations. As God's ministries, they are to render unto God only. 2 years ago in a town hall meeting, Acting Attorney General Patrick Morrissey was questioned by me about the violation of Article 6, Section 47 in this very room. Mr. Morrissey indicated that I had already brought this to his attention and that he took the Constitution seriously and was looking into it. In January of 2015, a physical meeting took place in the State Law Library with Stephen Travis, a member of Mr. Morrissey's staff. That meeting was attended by two pastors, one being Pastor Mike House of Elkins, in which unlawful church incorporation was discussed. Sadly, after a total of 3 meetings with either Mr. Morrissey or his staff concerning a clear violation of the state's constitution, there has been no response, formal or otherwise. I have shown you my teaching contract, which includes a contract of oath to both state and federal constitution. To know and understand the rule of law is being violated, and especially when it is a constitutional violation, and to do nothing about it is considered a misprision of felony. I take misprision of felony very seriously, and so should you. Your oath of office, as was my signed and attested oath in my teaching contract, is just that, a contract. When you took an oath of office, it became an important part of your employment contract to officially bind that oath between you and me. I have provided you with my personal acceptance of your oath, so that's a document that I have given you. Also, I accept your oath as a personal contract between us. I assure you that I hold no malice towards you. I don't believe you to be responsible for church incorporation in Randolph County. I don't believe the acting governor, acting state attorney general, acting state legislators, or acting state Supreme Court justices being responsible for churches throughout the state being incorporated. While I have presented information as to why I and others believe it happened, that is not the issue that needs attention. It is impossible to have and expect to keep a moral society with increasingly muzzled churches. I have no doubt that the framers of our Constitution understood this when they said concerning church property, quote, so that it shall be used or held, used, or transferred for the purposes of such church or religious denomination. By incorporating, the government has every right to dictate how it can be used, as it is a creation of the state government. I can and will gladly provide you with any documentation I have addressed, implied, or that I have that is relevant to this situation. Shortly you will receive copies of all documentation that I and others provided Mr. Morrissey and other public servants in Charleston, and were incorporated in Supreme Court of Appeals case 15-0491. My purpose in all this is to reestablish the rule of law between the people and their government, and to free the churches to be the ministries of God for all people. Upon formulation, I would like your plan of action in writing. I would also like the results of your actions to be summarized and presented in written form. We all bear responsibility to educate and take action concerning the rule of law, and it must be righteous law. Failing to do so will inevitably lead to the destruction of our land and impoverishment of our posterity. And I've signed that for you.
All right. Bill, we'll take your request under consideration.
I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay. Welcome back. I intend now to just basically summarize what you've seen, what you and I and the Randolph County Commission should do about the situation. You know, it seems crazy to try to craft more laws when we don't have the rule of law. You know, why should we cry unconstitutional when the Constitution has actually been suspended? But if it isn't suspended, well then let's enforce it. And if we can't enforce it, then it must be suspended. And why claim we have government of, by, and for the people when, as we can see in the present election cycle, people in both major parties, Democrat and Republican, are seeing that it's a big club and you ain't in it, as George Carlin famously said. We have corporations, and the corporations are not government of, by, and for the people. For instance, I'd just like to share a couple corporations that are can be easily found on the internet with Dun & Bradstreet, or subsidiary company called Manta. Attorney General, West Virginia, a privately held company in Charleston. Okay. West Virginia Legislature, a privately held company in Charleston. Located, get this, West Virginia, well actually they go by Virginia West Legislature, but if you look at their phone number and you look at their website, it's the West Virginia Legislature, okay? But they call it the Virginia West Legislature, and it's at 105 Bradley Drive, and they were a party to our lawsuit. They were named in our lawsuit, I should say. West Virginia Supreme Court, a privately held company in Charleston, West Virginia. 3709 Venable Avenue. That's a private residence, folks. Here's West Virginia Governor's Mansion, Canal Boulevard East, Charleston, West Virginia, a privately held company. Here's an interesting one, Governor's Office, a privately held company in Charleston, West Virginia, and it's categorized under entertainment services. Our records show it was established in 2008. That's because it's Governor Tomlin's Governor's Office Incorporation. Incorporated in West Virginia. Current estimates show this company has an annual revenue of unknown and employs a staff of approximately over 10,000. So Governor's Office has about 10,000 employees, and it is a private held company in Charleston, West Virginia. I'm not making this up, folks. I'm not making this up. So it's our responsibility that we have the rule of law, and that's why I'm doing this. And the churches need to be free. And if you're a church member, go to your pastor and ask him if you are incorporated, because in reality, churches are non-taxable. They don't have to be tax exempt because they're non-taxable. It's just the government's way of controlling you. It's called compliance. That's what we are told we must be, compliant. That the government knows best. We don't know how to govern ourselves. And even though we're people and they're people, they know and can do, and we don't know and can't do. And we can't protect ourselves. They must protect us. And it's all a bunch of BS. Okay, folks, I almost forgot the promise I made to address what the Southern Poverty Law Center said about Call to Decision Ministry and the website that I manage and what we traffic, which is a patriotic conspiracy theory about a secret plot to form a socialistic government known as the New World Order. Well, let's see what David Rockefeller, okay, uncle to Jay Rockefeller, and if you've heard of the Council on Foreign Relations or the Trilateral Commission, then you know who I'm talking about here. David Rockefeller. He's kind of like the wizard behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz, who's pulls strings and has friends like Henry Kissinger and Brzezinski and globalists. And here's what he says in his autobiography called Memoirs, New York Times bestseller, okay, chapter 27, titled Proud Internationalist. And under a section called Populist Paranoia, we find, quote, some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interest of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and am proud of it. What? He's proud of belonging to a secret cabal? He's proud to conspire with others? He's proud to build a global and political economic structure, one world? That's his words. That's why I was running against Jay Rockefeller, his nephew, for the 2014 Senate seat that Jay was not going to run again, when he was not going to run again. So the Southern Poverty Law Center attacks me. Okay, well, anyway, thanks for being on board. God bless. Catch you next week, I hope. And see you then. Bye.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. And by the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care.